Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Paddock Pass podcast. We're in the wake of the Japanese Grand Prix, and believe it or not, Neil Morrison, there's a break. So what on earth is happening with you? Where are you? Are you still in Japan? Have they built a temple yet in your honor?
Yes, and no to those questions, Ed. I'm still in Japan yet. I'm in Tokyo. I've been here for the last couple of days, and I'm going to Australia tomorrow night, which is Thursday night. So, it's been my first chance to properly explore Tokyo. Hasn't stopped pissing raining since Monday, unfortunately, but actually, I feel it adds to the atmosphere of the place. I think of all the cities in the world to be in when it's like hammering it down with rain, Tokyo is probably the most picturesque. So yeah, big Blade Runner vibes, but yeah, fantastic place. Definitely be coming back.
Have you been stuffing your face? I mean, I gather Tokyo probably has a little bit more variety of culinary choice compared to the small village of Motegi.
Is there any place, Ad, where I'm not stuffing my face? You should know better by now. The food options have been great. They've been plentiful. Yeah, I had maybe the best ramen of my life yesterday on Tuesday. Oh, it was fabulous. And it was like this little place where maybe about 6 or 7 people could sit, and you sat up at the at kind of like the bar, looking into the kitchen where the guys were making the ramen, and it was pretty authentic. It was really cool, really nice.
David Emmett, konnichiwa. How are you doing there in the Netherlands? Have you been for a ride yet this week?
Not on the motorbike, but I have been on the bicycle. So that's good. I mean, but any outing on 2 wheels is very, very, very good.
Have you recovered slightly from the tedium of the last Grand Prix?
Yeah, a little bit. I watched some paint dry. Watched the grass grow.
Rearrange your sock drawer.
Yeah, exactly. Did me taxes, just to get the heart going again.
We were invigorated by the last moto of the Motocross of Nations, I believe. You and I were swapping some messages.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was watching the especially the third race, and it was a cracker. It was very, very good.
Corner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Just a superb move by Geisha on one of the Lawrence's, probably Jet.
Yeah. The track was a debacle. I mean, it was really vicious. I would advise anybody, if you're in a motorcycle racing, go and watch the last of 3 races from Motegi Basin in the UK. Was on the same weekend as Japan, the Japanese Grand Prix. Some good stuff, some close racing, and just packing the best riders from the American AMA series into MXGP and the World Championship produces those kind of spectacles. I think they're going to be looking to do some more combined events in the future. But anyway, we're talking motocross when we should be talking MotoGP, and we're going to go through some questions that have been sent to us through our Patreon subscribers, as usual, in the weekly show after a race. If you want to join us on Patreon, as we keep banging this drum, become a Paddock Insider. We have some cool competitions. We've got one coming up next week for a new Arai helmet, so we'll be making those details available soon. But we have loads more content on the Patreon channel. We have a Discord community chat where there's a sizable degree of banter between all of us, led mostly by David, I have to say. Apologies if anyone finds it slightly brisk and forthright, but there we go. If you follow Dave on Twitter, then if you want some more of that, then just come and join us on Discord.
Seems unlikely.
Yes, and
mind that people do.
Join us there, and of course you can send us questions for these type of podcasts as well in between the races, so we're going to get tucked into some of those. Firstly, guys, is there any kind of news filtering out of the Japanese Grand Prix before we head into the last 4 rounds of the season? There was some sort of minor issue with the Moto2 Grand Prix winner. What was going on there, Dave?
It seems that the sponsor, the Chinese motorcycle maker QJ Motor, has demanded that Manu Gonzalez be sacked. And I'm going to get into an area which I know absolutely nothing about, and so my ignorance is, I hope people will excuse it. People who know much more than me will know about it. But he was, I think, wearing a headband which was used by the by Japanese kamikaze pilots in the Second World War, but it's also quite just a sort of a fairly standard sort of Japanese thing to wear a headband like that. But Chinese sponsors do not take that kindly because of the absolute horrors which the Imperial Japan committed prior to the Second World War. And so they've taken that very badly, and they want him sacked. I mean, you can't really blame Manu Gonzalez. He's a motorbike racer. He doesn't know about this. He doesn't understand about this. But you would blame the PR people. The PR people should need to know about this, especially if you have a Chinese sponsor. You have to understand especially a Chinese title sponsor. You need to understand the sensibilities. Whether you agree with them or not, it doesn't matter. You're taking their money, and you're going to dance to their tune. So, they should have known. They should have said, maybe not this time. Maybe next year when you're sponsored by someone else. The thing is, like, Japan has a really positive image inside the MotoGP paddock, understandably, because they provide so many. They've provided so many bikes. Within the motorcycle industry, it's a very important country. They've done fantastic things for motorcycling, and we sort of forget the unpleasantness that was pre-1945. So yes, it's again, I don't know enough about this. That's my ignorance. But basically, the sensitivity between China and Japan is a big issue, and it's going to be a much bigger issue as the role of the Chinese motorcycling industry grows.
Yeah, from what I've seen, there's no confirmation of what's happening. I mean, we're recording here on Wednesday around noon European time. There's been no confirmation of this from Gresini yet. However, if you look on QJ Motor's website and go to their motor racing section, there's a little profile of Albert Arenas, and there used to be a profile there of Manu Gonzalez. So Gonzalez's profile has been removed, which seems pretty ominous for him. And would be a pretty dramatic way to round off this Japanese trip. I mean, talk about hero to zero. And to give this some context, I think Adrian Fernandez wore a similar headband on the Moto3 podium after he finished third in the Moto3 race. But I guess Leopard don't have any association with Chinese sponsors, which means that it wasn't really, or a fuss wasn't kicked up. Certainly in the circles that we read, there may have been some Japanese fans watching that, which thought it was maybe poor taste, and but I'm not aware of that. So yeah, Gonzalez, as Dave says, you can't really blame. You can maybe blame him for being ignorant, but also I think the team needs to take a bit of responsibility for this.
Maybe it's a general issue a little bit, when it comes to marketing in MotoGP. I mean, maybe teams just need to be aware of the sensitivities of particular locations and conflicts. I know it's an extra burden, like you say, Dave. I mean, we can be ignorant of certain topics when it comes to the topicality of history and whatever else, the geopolitical landscape. I mean, Johan Zarco as well was wearing like an Imperial Japanese symbol on his helmet for quite a few years, but yeah, I don't know. For example, I think Formula One teams have 60 to 70 people in their marketing departments. MotoGP, you're lucky if you get 2 to 3, maybe 4 at best for the factory team. So it's a big ask, but I don't think we should excuse those sort of situations. I mean, events should be planned in advance, and any kind of dedication should have a bigger 360 awareness of what it means.
Yep, exactly. You have to be prepared. I mean, and especially it's a title sponsor, so you have to be, much more aware of what's going on when it's a title sponsor than, if someone's giving you sort of $5,000 to have a sticker on the side of the fairing, then it's no big deal. But it's a very big. It's their title sponsor. So, and like I say, we've got CF Moto, QJ Motor. There's Cove moving in as well into rallies, for example. They're going to start coming into motocross. European motorcycle racing needs to be aware of these sensitivities.
Okay, well, let's move on to some listener questions for this particular show. The 2024 MotoGP World Championship is effectively narrowed down to Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia. So, that rivalry is sparking up again for the third season in a row. Racing Armchair asks, when is the spicy part of this rivalry going to kick in? I don't know, Neil, maybe your opinion first. My quick 2 cents is that I don't think there is going to be one. I mean, these guys have known each other since they were late teens. There's obviously like a lot of respect there. They're both riding the same motorcycle for the same brand. I just don't think there's necessarily a spark there unless there is some sort of on-track collision. I mean, we've come close to having some words in the press that could be interpreted as being a bit niggly, but there just isn't that kind of bad feeling because I don't think that's really Bagnaia's personality. And Martin, even though he can be quite cute with the media, doesn't seem to be particularly interested. He's not like a very confrontational guy. So I don't think he's very interested in that side of it either.
Yeah, you get the impression that both of these riders feel that it's just a bit of a waste of energy. I certainly think this time last year, when they were both going for the crown, there did seem to be a bit more niggle between the pair of them. And we obviously saw that I wouldn't say it overflowed, but there were one or two flashpoints towards the end of last year, most notably in Valencia, where Martin was basically trying to slow Bagnaia down on the Friday in the final race weekend to avoid him getting a spot in the Q2 qualifying session. There was maybe a tiny little hint that there was a tension or two in Indonesia. I think it was Pecco said something like, when Martin crashed out of the sprint, that he gave the impression like he didn't really understand what he was doing because he was going to win by 4 seconds. And I think that comment was put to Martin, and he bit a little bit and got a little bit arsey and sort of said, well, Pecco would say that, blah, blah, blah. And I think Pecco then went to Martin the next day on the rider parade and said that he wanted to let Martin know that his comments were taken out of context. And so, yeah, that's the kind of the atmosphere that we're in at the moment. It's very friendly and pally. And
they weren't taken out of context, though. I mean, like, his comments were not taken out of context. He did literally say exactly that, but it's just that it was blown up into a thing.
Exactly. Well, I don't think he meant to antagonize the Spaniard, is maybe what I'm saying, or certainly he was given that impression. But yeah, maybe at Valencia, if there's 5 points between them, we could see something. But yeah, it doesn't really give you the impression, does it, that there's a simmering hatred behind the scenes. I saw an interview with Davide Tardozzi that he gave one of the TV broadcasters over the weekend, and he said both the guys have a lot of mutual respect for each other. And it's not a friendship, but it's pally by kind of professional competitive athlete standards, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think they particularly like each other. They're in the sense that they're not going to be friends. Do you know what I mean? They're just sort of completely indifferent to each other. They had to hang. They shared a room for ages. Again, the funniest was last year in India when the Indian journalists, obviously because both of them had been riding for Mahindra, were trying to get them to be all pally and sort of have happy memories of sharing a room when they were riding for Mahindra. And it was quite obvious that that was not up there amongst their top 5 memories of all time. But yeah, they're not friends. They're not going to be, they're not going to be besties. But I think, Bagnaia is not that kind of rider, exactly as Neil said. He's not that kind of personality. And I think Martin is too focused on the things that he learned last year about staying calm, focusing on just winning and on the championship. And he believes, maybe understands, that he doesn't have the extra mental capacity to be using that kind of sort of psychological warfare. I mean, you would see, like Valentino Rossi famously, Marc Marquez also famously likes to do that. Bagnaia and Martin are more the kind of riders who will stand their ground, but they're not going to go out and start sort of stirring it up in the hope of upsetting people.
Well, on that theme, Dave, Jono feels quite passionately about it, so much so that he wrote into us, and either that or he had a problem with his caps lock. But he said, why are people so fucking fixated on rivalry and petty schoolyard bullshit? Is there not enough of that in the world?
No, there isn't. Or, well, put it this way. It's great when it's in. I mean, people watch soap operas. People go to they spend their hard-earned money to go to the cinema to watch 3 hours of petty schoolyard squabbling when you think about it, in the form of Marvel movies, which is, just about some, as far as I can tell, it seems to be about the ownership of some jewellery, which is, it seems incredibly trivial. But look, the
Isn't
reason
conflict the root of all drama?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's the thing about the 7 stories, but yeah, to have drama requires a conflict. And the thing is, yes, I mean, if you want to sort of miss the drama altogether, you can watch robots race. You can just watch, you can watch Scalextrics or something. What people want, people are fans of riders. They're fans of people, and they want the character. They want the passion. They want they want to understand and know these people. And they're like, drama is part of that. Drama, that kind of drama is part of the human condition, and you can't sort of you can't get rid of it. And it's part of marketing. It's how you sell a series. It's how you attract casual fans. Fans come in for the drama, and hopefully they stay for the sport.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dave. And I'm not saying that I want there to be some dramatic rivalry every single year, and I don't want there to be a dramatic rivalry between every single rider. But I think you have to go back quite some time in MotoGP for there to have been a proper decent rivalry between the top 2 or top 3 riders in the field. I mean, the days of Quartararo and Bagnaia fighting was very pally and very friendly. Bagnaia and Martin has largely been very friendly and very pally. Even Dovizioso Marquez, those 3 years from 17 through to 19, was very cordial by Marc Marquez standards. I mean, you do have to go back quite some time to find the real rivalry, and I think it's that.
Neil,
cough. And
because how do you define a rivalry then, Neil? I mean, is it knocking each other off, or just slagging each other off in the press? I mean,
just a bit of casual hatred, I would say. A sort of simmering dislike, the feeling that the 2 people sitting in the press conference really can't stand the sight of each other. And yeah, a little bit of verbal sparring. And I think that it's just the fact that we haven't had that in so long. We're a bit starved. So maybe there is a bit of an obsession on our part, being journalists, being in the media, that, we want this, we bay for blood. But I would argue that it's something you want to see, not all the time, but from time to time. And we haven't had it for a while. So bring it back.
I'm not a great fan, especially if it seems slightly manufactured. Toss that shit off.
Yeah,
true.
No, I completely agree. No, there has to be a genuine dislike and hatred of one another, but it also has to be. What we want to see is people trying to beat each other off the track as well as on the track. I mean, like the track is the track. The race is the race. But watching people try to get into each other's heads off the off track is fun.
Neil, this one's for you. It's pretty much the last inquiry we've had, or poser, I guess you could say, on the Pecco versus Jorge duel. It's a little bit of a lengthy one, so bear with me. But Dylan Krupp says, why do the majority of people have such a jaded view of Jorge Martin? What did he do to hurt everyone and cause them to often view him through a negative lens, while Pecco is consistently seen through rose-coloured glasses? Pecco always praised as cool, calm, collected, while Jorge is more negatively labelled aggressive with a chip on his shoulder. What's your opinion there?
I mean, Pecco is correct in that Pecco is labelled as cool, calm, and collected, but I wouldn't say that Pecco is some kind of worshipped deity within the sport. He's no Valentino Rossi. He's not even Marc Marquez. I think he's respected, but I don't think he elicits really strong emotions in the casual fan, if I'm being honest. Some fans listening to this may disagree with me, but I think a lot of people, certainly from the UK or from the USA, not native Italians, might be looking at Pecco and think, yeah, great rider, but maybe doesn't elicit that sort of something special that you would get from some of the great riders in the past. I may be wrong, but that's just my personal opinion. And why is Jorge Martin seen as a kind of chippy rider with a chip in his shoulder? Well, he is that way, is he not? I mean,
yeah, mostly because that's exactly what he is.
Yeah, and he is a bit arrogant, and he does feel the need to remind everyone that he was the fastest rider in a particular race, even if he didn't manage to win it. Whenever a microphone is thrust in front of him, that's just the kind of way he is. But Yeah, I'm always quite surprised that Martin is the kind of the general population are a little indifferent towards Martin, because I think he's quite feisty. I think he's really interesting to listen to. I think his debriefs are always interesting, and it's he's quite analytical. The way he looks at racing, I think, is definitely worth listening to. So yeah, I find it surprising, especially when you see the reaction in Spain. That he doesn't have that kind of following at all in Spain. We've talked about this a few times, I think, this year on the podcast, but that sort of blows my mind. But I guess it's just the fact that Spain has a couple of other like genuine titans of the sport who have massive personalities that people can maybe get a little bit more on board with, like Marquez, like Acosta.
Yeah, I was sorry, Dave. I was writing about this in the book, but if you go back to the sprint in Jerez this year, which Martin won, in the press, in the media center at the time, we were saying, there seems to be more adoration for Acosta being on the podium as well, as Dani Pedrosa.
Yeah.
And then I think it was in Portimao. I mean, the first podium for Acosta, Jorge's in the press conference saying, well, don't forget, I was also on the podium of one of my first races as well, as if to, kind of underline the fact that, don't forget me and how good I am, when, that's clear with pretty much every meter of the track that he's on, how good he is.
Yeah, and I think there was a moment it was in Portimao where it was like some of that unseen footage after the race, after the press conference, and Jorge's speaking to Pedro, and they're talking about how are they leaving Portimao on that Sunday evening, and Pedro was talking about driving his van back to his hometown in Mazaron, and Jorge's like, "Oh, what? You're not taking like a plane?" And Pedro's like, "No, mate, like I drive my own van. Like, what's the point in taking a plane?" And I thought that sort of summed up they're kind of two different approaches to things. Jorge's a bit flash, he's a bit bling, traveling private jets, whereas Pedro is a bit closer to, maybe the punter that goes to watch a race in the grandstand.
Yeah, to an extent, Pedro has that in common a bit with Marquez and with Rossi, who are also. I mean, look, they've got cars and yachts and stuff, but it's not their thing. All of the stuff that you see of Mark on social media is of him sitting in it's usually of him rolling a motocross bike out the back of a van to go riding, sort of thing. Same with Rossi as well. Doesn't do so much sort of glamour stuff. It's much more you're just riding his bike and riding his bike around. But I think also I don't think Jorge Martin seems to. He doesn't seem to love the spotlight, if you see what I mean. Like he likes the attention, but he doesn't love the spotlight. He doesn't go out and seek the spotlight. And I think perhaps that's the difference.
A quick reminder, guys, on the Paddock Pass podcast that we're backed by Rental Street. So if you have a road bike and you need a new accessory, or you're in the market for a change, then check out rental.com, because there's a plethora of stuff to go through there. We're also backed by Fly Racing, thanks to the Americans. 25 years of Fly in 2024. So go and have a look at their website for any off-road gear. Also they got some decent street stuff as well. And then, of course, KTM.com. The KTM 990 Duke. I've just been writing about that yesterday in the 2 weeks that I had it during the summer. Fantastic motorcycle. Perfect blend between needing like a commuter around sort of the city, but then also a blast sort of on the back roads and when the streets kind of open up a little bit. So look at KTM.com. There's loads of bikes and temptation there. On the subject of KTM, we got a couple more of questions on the Pedro Acosta kind of angle, which I guess is pretty hot after Japan, because it was arguably his most competitive weekend. First pole position, of course, in MotoGP, but then didn't quite work out in the races. Neil, to you first. Craig Stanyon says, is it the case where maybe Pedro is chasing and trying too hard and getting a little bit too desperate for that first win?
Possibly. I think that is possibly a fair assessment, but you also have to admire him for just thinking, this is a year where I can take this risk. I've got nothing really to lose. I'm not fighting for a championship. I want to see just how far I can go. And I want to see just how fast I can be. And, there's that saying that riders occasionally mention that you learn more from riding with the absolute top guys in the class than you would do if you're down a little further down the order. And yeah, there is reason to maybe criticize Acosta for not maybe recognizing his limits on the Sunday, maybe riding a bit over them. But I think there is also something in his approach to admire, that it's just like let's go for it and let's put it let's put all in. Yeah, I think he is absolutely desperate. I mean, this is a guy that is right the way down through his career, has won massive amounts of races, and you can tell that it's starting to eat away at him that he hasn't won a race this year. So yeah, there is that kind of desperation. But yeah, I wouldn't be overly critical of him for doing what he did in Motegi.
Dave, Ricardo Rundevort, I hope I said that correctly.
You did.
Oh, there we go. Blimey. Colin Veyer. He says, can we just say that Pedro's crashes are normal rookie mistakes about handling the pressure, or is it just your hacking skills to stop Neil in the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've hacked their front tire sensor, so it's showing the wrong pressure, so that he always crashes. That's yes, to an extent, it's normal rookie mistakes. It's exactly what you expect. But like Neil says, it's also just ambition, sheer ambition. This year is about learning, understanding MotoGP, riding the bike, just understanding exactly where the limits are and all the rest of it, trying to find those limits and being willing to make mistakes. Next year, he has a different job. Next year, he'll be in the factory team. Next year, he'll be properly developing the bike. He'll have different responsibilities. And he is very, very smart. I think he understands this. I think he understands what his job is. So, yes, they're rookie mistakes, but also it's just hunger. It's just absolute hunger at wanting to win, wanting to succeed. Like he's a proper racer. He wants to win.
Reflecting on the 24 laps that we saw on Sunday, Tim Kendall says, are we missing something when we vent about a boring race? When the championship is in play, aren't strategic decisions to be sure of a point scoring finish important? Of course, Tim. I mean, it's part of the bigger picture. And, as much as Sunday's race was a bit of a snoozer, it was also a fantastic display of peerless riding by Pecco Bagnaia. It was faultless stuff. I think that kind of deserves its own admiration, because we can be sidetracked and distracted by action, fairing bashing, whatever you want to call it. But, when you see somebody really at the height of their powers, then I think that's also something to enjoy now and again. What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yes, I mean, like exactly that. Watching someone at the height of their powers is amazing, but not necessarily interesting. Like you could watching a brain surgeon do the most intricate operation can be sort of fascinating if that's your bag, but also just like you're watching something amazing, but it's not necessarily entertaining to you. That's the difference. Yes, these are sensible strategic decisions in the overall picture of the championship, but it's not fun to watch.
I would also just like to add very, very briefly, Motegi hasn't been a brilliant track for racing in years gone by. In fact, I'm struggling to think of too many really brilliant races that we've had there, or even really good races that we've had at Motegi.
2017 in the wet.
Yeah, in the wet.
Dovi versus Marquez, that was the only one. Because
So
I went back and had a look, and like there's always at least a second between first and second.
Yeah, and even the best championships, the most memorable championships that we've ever had, always have a couple of stinkers each year. So, yeah, I wouldn't be pondering this real snooze fest, or I wouldn't be sort of reading too much into it. Although I think, maybe this hasn't been the best year for vintage racing. I still think it's a championship which has lots of interesting things going on.
Neil, keep talking, because Emil says this kind of racing is meant to be entertaining. Why every time Pecco wins is such a boring race? I mean, it has been a Ducati championship, very much so, more than ever, you could say, in 2024. But for Bagnaia's brilliance and, the occasional sort of static races, I mean, he's also won by marginal time. I think in his championship season, his first one, the biggest sort of race winning margin was something like 0.7. I mean, it was he's proven that he's a guy that can handle pressure. But, do you have any thoughts as to why when Bagnaia wins, it's not usually a memorable race?
Well, I mean, he's not a Marc Marquez, or he's not a Valentino Rossi in that he just loves scrapping. He loves fighting. He kind of lives for that. His style is it's always been to get out front and to try and lead, to set his own pace. That's where he can do his kind of best work. it's a bit like we saw with Jorge Lorenzo in his career. I mean, the majority of Lorenzo's successes with Yamaha were pretty dull. Incredible rides, a lot of them, and you had to admire a lot of them as well, but not necessarily the most exciting to watch if you were a fan trackside or watching on TV. So I feel it's a bit like that, really. Yeah, and I think MotoGP now, more than ever, it is more important than ever to have clear track ahead of you. There's no doubt that following a rider in MotoGP now is more stressful for both rider and for machine than it has been in the past, and that's a big part of it as well.
One of the big news off the track in Japan was, of course, Romano Albesiano moving from Aprilia to HRC to be the technical director, coordinator. I'm not sure what the official...
Technical director.
Yeah, for 2025, which means he'll be linking up again with Alessio Spargaro, but this time for the Japanese. We talked about this a little bit on our Paddock Notes show. Again, that's another benefit of joining us on Patreon, because we do daily podcasts from the circuits. And, we had Neil with his boots on the ground in Motegi. So go back or join us on Patreon and go back and listen to those if you want a more detailed discussion on themes of a particular day. But Dave, Paul Lostia says, your thoughts on Honda's signing Albesiano? Will HRC change its DNA and embrace him? Will he have an impact, given that Ken Kawauchi had little impact or influence?
I mean, in the end, it's going to have a lot less to do with Romano Albesiano and a lot more to do with HRC and the internal culture of HRC. I think Paul Lostia is absolutely bang on when he points to the fact that it's much more about that internal culture. As we saw with Ken Kawauchi, Kawauchi was sort of sidetracked, so we don't really know how much of an impact he could have had. That's going to be a bit of a concern. My other concern with, Romano Albesiano became truly successful when he paired up with Massimo Rivola, because Albesiano was not, I don't want to say he's not a people person, he's a lovely man, all the rest of it, but he's very focused, he's very technical, he's much more interested in the technology than in the people side of things, and Rivola was just really, really good at managing the people side, and that was the bit that was missing from Albesiano in from Albesiano in Aprilia. Now, obviously, there's a completely different role in Honda. He is just going to be working on the technical side, but he's going to have to convince the engineers to do what he wants them to do, to take risks, to offer ideas, make changes, examine what needs to be done, and that's. But that again is a people skill as well. It's not just him with his 3D CAD and finite finite element analysis tools. He's going to have to persuade people to do things for him, and that's where that is going to be the difference between success and failure. If they can create a much more European atmosphere, then I think he has a chance.
Neil, Paul also wonders if Alberto Puig's time is up at HRC.
Difficult to know. I think his contract does end at the end of this year. And I haven't heard, I did see one or two rumours doing the round linking Francesco Guidotti, who is obviously leaving KTM at the end of this year, to Honda. But I think we've said before in the show that I don't get the impression that Puig is responsible or really for what's happened in Honda, or what the current predicament in which they find themselves. I think Puig has been trying to get this kind of thing going with Honda for the last couple of years, only to be blocked by some upper management. I think he was trying to get Honda to hire people from Ducati 2 years ago, only for the Japanese to insist that their way had to remain intact. So it's not for want of trying from Puig's side that Honda have been in the doldrums for the last couple of years. I think it's more about turning that huge company and management structure around to a kind of new way of thinking. What is interesting is when I spoke to someone from Honda over the weekend, they still weren't absolutely sure what Albesiano's role is going to be next year. There is talk about following Yamaha's lead and setting up some kind of European base. because that's, I mean, we're still yet to see the results of that from Yamaha's kind of decision to do that. But I think Honda realizes that they need to have a more European operation based in Europe, where they can be more reactive, more dynamic with their decision making, quicker with their reaction times. So that certainly does bode well. But again, the fact that it's such a big company, it's kind of like trying to turn an oil tanker around in the Thames River. It's not going to be done overnight. It's not even maybe going to be done in a year or a year and a half. And it is going to be so interesting just to see how Albesiano fares in that kind of thing, because from what I can see from his experience, he's only ever really had to deal with Italian companies and decision making in Italian structures, which which are very familiar with him, whether it was with Cagiva back in the 90s or in the Piaggio group, then into the Aprilia MotoGP project, 2015. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating to see how this will pan out.
Yeah, I mean, Neil is spot on. But I think the other thing that people, especially fans outside of the paddock, don't understand is how beloved Alberto Puig is within the team. He's seen as very strict and hard, but they love him, and especially the riders. The riders absolutely love him because he can give them it. Because he's an ex-rider, he knows exactly what they need, and he will make sure that they have what they need to do their job. Now, to do that, he's dependent on the Japanese side of the operation, and that's the problem. But I don't really see HRC getting rid of Alberto Puig. There's no reason to, and there's no one who's going to do a better job at the moment.
And another thing that I heard in Motegi was that maybe Honda didn't quite get what they were expecting from Ken Kouchi. Maybe he wasn't able to offer the level of expertise and direction that they thought he could when they signed him from Suzuki. That's another thing that I'd heard. Well,
Ken's inverted smile definitely suited the Honda circumstances and plight in MotoGP.
The Honda vibe.
Yeah, that kind of, they kept cutting to his face in the pit box. And I thought, well, that's all you really need to show. But I'm not too optimistic about Albesiano's chances in HRC. I think, there needs to be almost like a little team there, not just like one person. It does really depend on how he can influence people around him. But let's wait and see. Neil, just a quick one for you, actually. Perrari says there was a Japanese fan in the crowd with a sign saying that his dream was to work for the Ducati Lenovo team. What a slap in the face for the Japanese factories, don't you think?
Yeah, possibly. Although there were a lot of fans in KTM garb, a lot of fans in Aprilia garb, a lot of fans in Ducati garb, from what I could see at the race track at the weekend. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if we can read too much into this, but I mean, yeah, there's not a great deal to cheer about, is there, for the Japanese factories at the moment, even for Japanese fans? So, yeah, maybe it is a slap in the face, but it's kind of the reality of the times.
Yeah, I mean, if there's somebody with a sign at a Taylor Swift gig saying, "I want your babies," then I don't think he should really read too much into that either. I mean, I guess it is just a sign. Dave, we don't really like to be salacious gossip hounds on the Paddock Pass podcast, but Mark B asked us a question saying, would Enea Bastianini's comments on Brad Binder be any more reasonable if he was still in the title fight, or is it just racing? Would you care just to expand on this very quickly?
Yeah, well, so Enea Bastianini, rather hilariously, was complaining about the fact that Brad Binder had the temerity to try to beat him, even though he was clearly not as fast as Bastianini. Bastianini seemed quite upset about this, and to me, no, it's racing. It's Brad's job is to try to finish ahead of as many riders as possible, and he is allowed to do anything within the rules to try to achieve that. And, he rode superbly. He rode very, very well, very, very defensively, kept Bastianini behind him, who was seriously about half a second faster than him. But he kept him behind him for a very long time. So hats off to him. Would Bastianini have the right to complain if he was still in the championship? No. It's Bastianini's job to get past Brad Binder, not Brad Binder's job to give up the position to Enea Bastianini. It's every race is a race. It's a single independent event. They're all united within the larger shape of the championship, but each race is an individual event, and everyone is out there that day, that moment, those 45 minutes, trying to achieve the best possible result for themselves on the day.
Neil, we referenced the prevalence of European brands at Motegi. It was a bit of a stinker for the Japanese, of course, with Yamaha. I mean, a miserable weekend for Fabio Quartararo and also Alex Rins. DJ Purchase says, to paraphrase Seinfeld, what's the deal with Alex Rins?
What's the deal is that he is coming back from a career-threatening injury. Is that he's still, I would say, not really close to full physical fitness, and that he's aboard a package that isn't showing great competitiveness at the moment. I think it's as simple as that, really. I mean, we know that Rins is a class rider, but he is jumping on a bike, an inline four machine after riding a V4 Honda last year, and it's kind of a factory in flux. He's having to do a lot of testing work. They've tried 7 different engines this year. They've tried, I don't know how many chassis, but I'm willing to say probably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
He's having to test extensively as well as race. So yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those factors. But yeah, no, it is sad to kind of see Alex Rins in this kind of way because, yeah, we know what a quality rider he is.
Neil, moving subjects, I want you to answer another question because I think you're best qualified for this one. But Peter Newell says, what's going on with American racing team? Because, Joe Roberts was a title candidate in the beginning of the season. Now he seems to be struggling a bit more into the races. Perhaps it's not a situation, say, with Sergio Garcia, where, the opportunity for MotoGP has affected him, quite profoundly. And also, we know behind the scenes with the American racing team, there's been some changes there. Just what's your perspective on the team's fall from the top, as Peter puts it?
Well, I think what you said there, Ad, is kind of quite relevant and quite, certainly explains a little bit of it. I think the fact that Joe didn't get a seat in MotoGP for 2025 affected him in quite a profound way after the summer break. I managed to catch up with him just after the race at Misano too, and he said that it really did have him quite down for quite a number of weeks, and he didn't have that same kind of clear headspace that he had at the start of the year where everything was just kind of clicking and coming into place. I think also at the start of the year, Joe and American Racing were one of the team's riders that clicked immediately with the Pirelli tires. And what we've seen since the kind of summer break is that some of the riders and teams and packages that initially struggled with that change have come up to speed and gained a better understanding of what's going on. So the likes of Arbolino, Canet, Vietti, Dixon have come back into the fray when in the first half of the year they were nowhere. Except for maybe a couple of notable occasions. And then also the fact that, there's been a split with Joe's personal manager, not John Hopkins. He's left the team. There was definitely some friction between John and the team owner, Eitan Butbull. And I think John is pretty close to Joe. Obviously, he's personal manager. So he is someone that Joe trusts. And for that to have ended, it seems in quite an acrimonious way. I'm sure that hasn't helped things either. I think all of those things have probably played a bit of a part. I do think Joe from Misano too, and in Indonesia, a couple of 6th places, he was looking a lot more like his old self that we saw in the first part of the year. But I mean, if we're looking at things in the harsh light of day, American Racing hasn't been one of the top Moto2 teams in Moto2 history. That first half of this year, along with maybe parts of 2020 was kind of the only time that we've seen them right at the front of the class. So I think all of those factors have probably had some kind of influence.
Dave, the next one to you. Lawrence asks if Franco Morbidelli will have access to data and notes next year, when he's part of the VR46 Ducati team, to the factory boys. And if so, will that give him a slight advantage with all the other changes that are going on?
Well, yes and yes, although it will only be a slight advantage. Basically, all of the data is owned by Ducati. All of the notes and stuff that that the Pramac team make is also stored on Ducati's computers. They have all of that setup stuff. There's all of that feedback. So, that will basically be staying in Ducati. The R46 team will have access to that. So, yes, I mean, there's still going to be issues because they've got to, Frank has got to fit into this new team. But he knows most of them quite well, so it shouldn't be that difficult. But, the data and the setup is all going to be there.
Do we think, since Morbidelli had his accident and his concussion, that he's been slightly different? I just get the vibe with him, the way he sort of talks to us in the media debriefs. Some of the performances have been a bit erratic. I think that kind of injury in that moment, kind of had a bit more of a profound effect than we all like to think.
Yeah, I think, look, he suffered a traumatic brain injury. He didn't know where he was. He'd forgotten all about it. That is a serious... that's a serious issue. So, yeah, I think there are lingering after effects. Not, it's clearly not affecting his riding. He's now perfectly capable of riding and racing, but I think there are still issues, and I think it has affected him quite badly.
Dave, this is another one. Jono has sent, I'm not sure if he's kind of, mentioning you here specifically, but he says, is Marquez turning into an old man with his walking out of the steward's office, grumbling to himself? And should Dave be worried that Mark is coming for his crown? So there's no subtlety whatsoever with that question.
No, exactly. No, look, Mark Marquez is walking out of the. He's doing exactly what every motorcycle racer does when they come out of the steward's office, because every racer believes that they did nothing wrong. It's all the fault of someone else, and they've been cruelly robbed of a victory, basically, because everyone else was cheating and the stewards didn't punish them. So, no, that's exactly what you would expect him. He didn't get his way, therefore he's going to be grumpy about it. And yeah, it was a bit harsh, really. That not that he got his lap taken away, but that the stewards couldn't send the notification on time. But that's just the way it is.
We're going to let Jono have one more question because he might be cancelled after that one by Dave. So he says, Neil, are you staying in a capsule hotel in Tokyo?
I'm not, as you can see. I'm staying in it's a cozy hotel room, but it's got a double bed. It's not got much space aside from the double bed, and it is quite a picture to see me getting in and out of the shower. I'm sure all of you would like to see that, wouldn't you? Not.
Well, we are wondering which MotoGP personality is going to come out of the bathroom and give you a big slippery kiss this podcast. I mean, is Alberto Puig back there sorting out his hair, ready for his appearance? Or what?
Yeah. No, just be little old me at in this hotel at the moment. But no, I haven't tried the capsules. I haven't seen them. I'm a bit claustrophobic. I don't know if I would fit in the capsules, to be honest. I mean, I think my legs would maybe be poking out at the bottom of them. But I think a bit more space is needed.
Well, worryingly,
how could I do a podcast from a capsule?
Lying down, it looked like you're in some sort of tube.
That's why they call it a podcast.
Your background there on the video, it kind of looks like a padded cell, your hotel room. So I'm not too sure where you've actually checked yourself into. But anyway, VJ, lastly, on this podcast today says, Dave, there should be more races outside of Europe because it's much better for his personal timetable. What are your views on that one?
My views are there should be more races in America because that really suits me, but there shouldn't be any races in Europe because that doesn't suit me.
There we go. Neil just typed to me on the messenger to remind everybody on this podcast that David Alonso was kind of voted Rider of the Weekend of the Japanese Grand Prix with 33% of the vote compared to Bagnaia's 31%. I think we can all agree with that. We've been very effusive about the Colombian/Spaniard with his achievements in Moto3 and all that raging potential for the future in MotoGP. What a special rider. Some cool celebrations as well. It seems like the Aspar team, full congratulations to them for yet another phenomenal talent to come through their ranks, but they definitely have their shit together when it comes to toasting a championship. So anyway, that's pretty much the end of the podcast. Neil, what are your plans? You're moving to Australia. You're going to be hanging out in Melbourne for a little bit and then heading down to the island, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I have another day in Tokyo tomorrow. I'm going to go, and I've just been walking around lots so far. One of the more interesting things I saw today was a cafe where you can sit on the ground, have coffee served to you, and pet small baby pigs, which was something that was new to me. Also, cat cafes are all the rage here in this Shinjuku neighborhood where I'm staying. You can basically go and have a cat kind of come up to you and pet it while you're drinking your latte.
Cat cafes are a thing everywhere. I was in.
Are they?
I was in Rye in Sussex, and came past and saw
Lovely
a
town.
cat cafe. Yeah, lovely indeed. But there was a cat cafe there.
Did you have ham on rye when you were there?
I did not have ham on rye, no.
So yeah, going to check out a few galleries, I think, tomorrow. Not flying until late, and then in Sydney for 5 days. So yeah, excited to check out another new city before going down to the island. I
was hoping we'd get to the end of this podcast without mentioning it, but Dave has just written to me in the chat box saying the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League update. As we well know, I've announced my retirement from this particular competition, but somebody is doing rather well and wishes to talk about it. Of course, Alpine Stars giving us support on the podcast in 2024, and the winner of our particular fantasy league will be getting a special care package from the Italo Americans at the end of the season. But Dave, how's it going?
I mean, it's going good for me because I'm 40th. Neil is 361st, and actually he's been doing reasonably well. Steve, 1098, a lovely Ducati number there. And Adam,
retired.
Not quite so good. Yeah, exactly. Top three at the moment are Danny Team 32, KCPX, and LDV Team. And the top two also have one more boost left. There's absolutely no chance of me catching either of those two. But I'm also 8th in the Netherlands, which, to be honest, I'm now really focused on see if I can podium in my home country.
Just to wrap the show, what rider would you boost if you had one less left, considering the remaining Grand Prix? Would it be a Marquez in Phillip Island or a Bagnaia in Sepang? What are the most obvious candidates?
That's actually a good question. I mean, if I'm going to boost a rider, I think I would boost Bagnaia because he has more doubles. He's done more of the pole, sprint, and GP wins. So, but whether it be at Sepang, maybe Valencia, who knows? Yeah, maybe whether it be at Sepang, whether it be at Buriram, that would also be an interesting one.
I have I have one boost left, so I'm thinking Mark at Phillip Island or Valencia. That's sort of my plan, but I guess we need to get there first and see exactly what's going on. You'll be surprised to learn it's going to be cold and windy in Phillip Island next week.
No, surely not.
Who saw that coming?
Well, at least we might get a race, though.
Yeah,
2.
hopefully.
If we play our cards right.
Well, listen, that's the end of this week's show. Neil, enjoy dinner there in Tokyo, all the pussy. Dave, have a free weekend. Oh, I almost tried to say that without laughing. Enjoy the free weekend because I will. Certainly. And then we'll regroup next week. We'll have a quick preview, maybe earlier in the week for the Australian Grand Prix. And also Steve is going to be checking in from the World Superbike round. They're in Estoril, I believe, in Portugal.
Yep.
So
a lovely track, and I wish it was still on the calendar.
Rainy...
the track itself is not great, but just the whole experience there was fantastic.
Yeah, and perhaps it will stay dry as well. Rain could be the theme of the next races coming up. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon.